Mini alien girl feared the human would devour her, but things took an unexpected turn. Elijah Blackwood needed a break from the endless stream of mission reports. After 6 months stationed on the frontier planet Silveria, even the most dedicated special operations officer could use some downtime. The constant barrage of data analysis and tactical assessments was enough to make anyone's head spin. Running his fingers through his stylishly tousled brown hair, he adjusted the circular blue light indicators on his shoulders, standard issue for his advanced stealth suit. The black leather-like material hugged his athletic frame as he made his way through the base's security checkpoints. "Taking a walk, Commander," Lieutenant Richards called from his post. "Just clearing my head, Lieutenant." Sometimes you need to step away from the screens before they burn your retinas out. The dense, violet-hued forest beyond the perimeter beckoned. Elijah had always been fascinated by Silveria's unique ecosystem, the way the local flora seemed to pulse with an inner light, creating an ethereal atmosphere that reminded him of Earth's bioluminescent creatures. As he ventured deeper into the forest, his combat training kicked in automatically. Even during a casual stroll, old habits died hard. Every rustle of leaves, every shadow movement caught his attention. The piercing blue eyes that had earned him top marks in tactical assessment swept the surroundings methodically. That's when he saw her. At first he thought his eyes were playing tricks on him. Lying unconscious among the luminescent undergrowth was what appeared to be a miniature humanoid figure, no more than 2 feet tall. Her skin was a delicate shade of lavender, and long, straight hair of the same color was tied back in a ponytail. She wore what could only be described as an alien version of a metallic bikini, which seemed to shimmer with its own inner light. "Well, I'll be damned," Elijah muttered, crouching down for a closer look. In all his years of space exploration, he'd never encountered anything quite like this. The tiny being was clearly sentient. Her features were too refined, too intelligent-looking to be anything else. Carefully, he reached out with both hands, scooping her up as gently as possible. She felt surprisingly warm to the touch, and he could detect a faint pulse, or whatever passed for a pulse in her species. The moment his hands made contact, her eyes fluttered open, revealing iridescent orbs that seemed to contain entire galaxies. For a split second, they stared at each other in mutual amazement. And then she screamed, "Please don't eat me!" She squeaked, her voice a musical blend of terror and what sounded oddly like flirtation. "I know I'm small and probably look delicious, but I taste terrible. Really, really terrible." Elijah couldn't help but laugh, though he quickly composed himself when he saw her trembling. "Easy there, little one. I'm not going to eat you, I promise." She blinked rapidly, her tiny hands clutching at his gloved fingers. You're not? But you're so enormous, and all the stories say that giant aliens devour smaller species." "I can assure you humans don't eat sentient beings," Elijah replied, trying to keep his voice gentle and reassuring. "I'm Commander Elijah Blackwood of the Earth Special Operations Division, and you are—" "Lilia," she answered, still wary but seemingly fascinated by his face. "I'm a sylphid. We're native to this world, but we usually stay hidden from the larger species." She paused, then added with what seemed like a hint of coyness, "Though I must admit, none of our stories mentioned how handsome the giant aliens might be." Elijah felt his ears grow warm. Was this tiny alien actually flirting with him? "Well, Lilia, it's a pleasure to meet you. Would you mind telling me why you were unconscious in the forest?" She shifted in his palms and he noticed a slight wince. "I was gathering luminescent moss for my village's healing chambers. I must have slipped and hit my head on a crystal formation." Her eyes widened suddenly. "Oh no, the moss! I dropped my collection bag." "Let me help you look for it," Elijah offered, carefully scanning the ground. He spotted a tiny shimmering pouch near where he'd found her. "Is that it?" "Yes." She bounced excitedly in his hands, then immediately steadied herself, looking slightly embarrassed. "I mean, yes, that's it. Would you mind—" Elijah knelt down, keeping his hands steady as he retrieved the tiny bag with his fingertips. "Here you go, though perhaps you should rest a bit before heading back to your village. That bump on your head could be serious." Lilia took the bag, then looked up at him with those galaxy-filled eyes. Would you mind sitting with me for a while? Just until the dizziness passes? And maybe you could tell me about your world?" "I'd like that," Elijah replied, settling down on a fallen log. He carefully held her at chest level so they could talk more comfortably. Though I have just as many questions about your people, if you're willing to share. It's a deal, she smiled, making herself comfortable in his palms. Though I should warn you, I might just keep you talking until the moon's rise. I've got nowhere else to be, he grinned, finding himself oddly enchanted by this unexpected encounter. What followed was one of the most fascinating conversations of Elijah's life. Lilia told him about the Sylphid civilization, how they lived in harmony with the crystal formations of the forest, using the natural resonance of the crystals for everything from healing to communications. In turn, he shared stories about Earth and humanity's journey to the stars. As the forest's bioluminescence grew stronger with the approaching dusk, Lilia finally said, I should return to my village. But would you come back tomorrow? Same location? There's something I'd like to ask you, but I need to consult with our elders first. I'll be here, Elijah promised, carefully setting her down on a crystal outcropping. Try not to hit your head on any more crystals in the meantime. She laughed, a sound like tiny wind chimes. No promises, Commander, but at least now I know there's a handsome giant who might come to my rescue. With a final wave, she disappeared into the underbrush, leaving Elijah to wonder if he'd imagined the whole encounter. The next day, Elijah found himself checking his appearance in the reflective surface of his datapad more times than he cared to admit. He told himself it was just a standard protocol. Maintaining a professional appearance was part of being a special operations commander. But deep down, he knew he was primping for Lilia. Going for another walk, sir? Lieutenant Richards asked, his knowing smirk suggesting he wasn't fooled by Elijah's casual demeanor. Environmental reconnaissance, Lieutenant. Those reports won't write themselves. The forest seemed different today. The bioluminescent flora pulsed with more intensity, as if nature itself was attuned to his anticipation. Elijah made his way to their meeting spot, his advanced suit's sensors picking up unusual crystal resonance patterns in the area. You came back, Lilia's melodious voice carried from above. He looked up to find her perched on a crystal formation, her lavender skin gleaming in the ethereal light. Today, her metallic attire seemed to shimmer with more intricate patterns, catching and reflecting the forest's glow in mesmerizing ways. I gave my word, didn't I? Elijah smiled, extending his hand. She gracefully stepped onto his palm, and he noticed she moved with more confidence today, completely at ease with their size difference. I have to admit, she said, settling cross-legged in his hand, I spent half the night convincing our elders that you weren't going to eat our entire village. Elijah chuckled. I hope you were persuasive. Oh, very. Her galaxy-filled eyes sparkled with mischief. I told them how you rescued me and how your eyes hold more kindness than any being I've ever met. She paused, then added softly, though I may have left out the part about how attractive I find you. Elijah felt his ears grow warm again. Lilia. Oh, don't worry, she waved her tiny hand dismissively. Among my people, it's perfectly normal to be direct about attraction. We believe life's too precious to waste time dancing around our feelings. She tilted her head, studying his reaction. Though I'm sensing humans might be different. We tend to be more reserved, Elijah admitted. Though I'd be lying if I said I didn't find you fascinating. Just fascinating? She batted her eyelashes playfully, before Elijah could formulate a response that wouldn't violate about 12 different diplomatic protocols. Lilia's expression turned serious. But that's not why I asked you here today. We need your help, Elijah. She stood up in his palm, her tiny form radiating determination. Our village is under threat. Crystal beasts, we call them shard claws, have been growing more aggressive lately. They used to avoid our settlements, but something's changed. They're attacking our crystal gardens, destroying our healing chambers, and... She hesitated. 3 days ago, they took one of our children. Elijah's jaw tightened. I'm sorry, Lilia, that's terrible. Our warriors are skilled, but we're simply too small to effectively combat these creatures. They're about your size, with crystalline scales and claws that can cut through our strongest materials. She looked up at him pleadingly. Would you help us? I know it's asking a lot, but yes, Elijah said without hesitation. Of course I'll help. Lilia's eyes widened. Just like that? You don't even want to know what's in it for you. You need help protecting children from monsters, Elijah said simply. That's all I need to know. Lilia stared at him for a long moment, then did something unexpected. She walked up his palm to his wrist, then hugged his thumb. The elders said humans were dangerous because of their size and strength, but they never mentioned your hearts might be just as big. Elijah carefully curled his finger around her in a gentle return of the embrace. Tell me everything you know about these shard claws. If we're going to protect your people, I need to understand what we're up against. As Lilia detailed the creature's habits and weaknesses, Elijah found his tactical mind already formulating strategies, but he also couldn't help noticing how she kept her hand resting on his thumb, or the way she seemed to lean into him when explaining particularly important points. The crystals are key, she explained. The shard claws draw power from them, but they can also be overwhelmed by too much crystal energy. We've tried using our resonance techniques against them, but we can't generate enough power at our size. What if we combined your knowledge with my strength? Elijah suggested. Could you teach me how to manipulate the crystal energy? Lilia's face lit up. Yes, but it would require very close contact. The energy flows through touch, and I would need to guide your movements. She bit her lip. Would that be acceptable? I think I can handle it, Elijah said, trying to keep his voice steady as she climbed onto his shoulder, her tiny hands brushing against his neck. First lesson, she whispered near his ear, sending an unexpected shiver down his spine. It was learning to feel the crystal's heartbeat. Close your eyes and listen. What followed was the most intimate training session Elijah had ever experienced. Lilia guided him through the basics of crystal manipulation, her small form pressed against his neck as she helped him attune to the forest's energy. Her touch was electric, sending tingles of both crystal energy and something more personal through his body. By sunset, Elijah had mastered the basic techniques, though he suspected Lilia's hands-on teaching method might have been more thorough than strictly necessary. Not that he was complaining. You're a natural, she praised, still perched on his shoulder. Most sylphids take weeks to learn what you've grasped in hours. I had an excellent teacher, he replied, turning his head slightly to look at her. Their faces were inches apart. Well, relatively speaking, and for a moment, the size difference between them seemed to vanish in the intensity of their shared gaze. Lilia broke the spell first, clearing her throat. We should begin planning our defense tomorrow. The shard claws usually attack at dusk. I'll be ready, Elijah promised. And Lilia, thank you for trusting me with this. Thank you for being trustworthy, she replied softly, then surprised him by placing a tiny kiss on his cheek before leaping gracefully to a nearby crystal formation. Same time tomorrow. Wouldn't miss it, Elijah said, touching the spot where her lips had been. As he watched her disappear into the crystal forest, he realized he was in dangerous territory. Not because of the shard claws, but because he was falling for someone he could hold in the palm of his hand. Yet somehow that detail seemed less important with each passing moment. The dusk brought more than just the threat of shard claws. As Elijah crouched behind a massive crystal formation, his advanced suit sensors picked up multiple crystalline signatures, approaching the sylphid village. Beside his neck, Lilia's tiny form tensed. 3 of them, she whispered, her breath tickling his ear. Bigger than usual. The creatures emerged from the luminescent underbrush, their crystalline scales refracting the forest's glow into deadly prismatic patterns. Each beast was roughly Elijah's height at the shoulder, with jagged crystal formations protruding from their spine and claws that looked sharp enough to slice through battle armor. Remember the training, Lilia murmured, her small hands pressing against his neck in a gesture that was both reassuring and distracting. Feel the crystal's pulse. Let it flow through you. Elijah closed his eyes briefly, attuning himself to the energy that seemed to hum through the very air. The past day's training with Lilia had opened his senses to this new dimension of reality, though he suspected not all of those tingles had been purely from the crystal energy. Ready? He asked, feeling Lilia shift to a more secure position on his shoulder. With you. Always. Elijah emerged from their hiding spot, hands already moving in the patterns Lilia had taught him. The nearest shard claw whirled toward him, its crystalline maw opening in a screech that set the surrounding crystals resonating. Now, Lilia called. Elijah thrust his hands forward, channeling crystal energy as Lilia had shown him. At the same moment, he felt her tiny form directing her own power through him. The combination was explosive. A wave of pure crystal energy erupted from his palms, far more powerful than anything they'd achieved during practice. The lead shard claw was thrown backward, its crystalline hide crackling with excess energy. That's new, Elijah managed, staring at his hands in amazement. Focus! Lilia's voice snapped him back to reality as the other two shard claws charged. What followed was a dance of crystal energy and physical combat. Elijah dodged and weaved, his special ops training complementing Lilia's crystal manipulation guidance. Together, they were devastating. When he moved left, she anticipated and channeled energy right. When he ducked, she sent pulses of power overhead. But it was more than just combat synchronization. Each time their energies combined, Elijah felt something shifting between them. The size difference seemed to blur, as if their very essences were meeting somewhere in the middle. The final shard claw fell with a resounding crash, its crystal hide overloaded to the point of shutdown. Elijah stood panting, his suit's indicators pulsing with residual energy. That was incredible, Lilia exclaimed, practically dancing on his shoulder. I've never felt crystal energy respond like that before. When our powers combined, it was like we were the same size, Elijah finished, turning his head to meet her gaze. Their eyes locked, and for a moment, the forest seemed to pulse in sync with their heartbeats. Lilia reached out, touching his cheek with her tiny hand. Despite the size difference, the contact felt enormous. Elijah, she said softly, I think we need to visit the ancient crystal chamber. The what now? It's a sacred place, deep in the crystal caves. The elders say it holds the secrets of our ancestors' crystal mastery. She bit her lip, a gesture he was coming to find irresistible. What we just did, it shouldn't be possible. A sylphid's crystal energy can't combine with other species like that. Unless what? Instead of answering, she leaped gracefully from his shoulder to a nearby crystal formation. Follow me, but be warned, no outsider has ever been allowed in the chamber. The elders might have my head for this. We could wait, get permission. No time, she interrupted. The shard claws will be back, stronger next time. We need answers now. She paused, giving him a look that made his pulse quicken. Besides, I'm tired of having to climb you like a crystal formation just to kiss your cheek. Elijah felt his face flush. Lead the way. The journey to the crystal chamber took them deeper into the forest than Elijah had ever ventured. The bioluminescent flora grew more intense here, and the crystal formations more elaborate. Lilia guided him through hidden passages and secret tunnels, all scaled to her size, forcing him to crawl and squeeze through spaces that challenged even his tactical training. The chamber's just ahead, Lilia called back, her tiny form navigating the crystal maze with practiced ease. But there's something you should know first. Elijah paused his careful maneuvering through a particularly tight crystal corridor. What's that? The chamber, it responds to emotional resonance as much as crystal energy. The stronger the connection between those who enter, the more it reveals. She turned to face him, her galaxy-filled eyes serious. What I'm trying to say is... A distant screech cut her off. More shard claws, and they were close. Into the chamber now, Lilia urged. They burst into a vast crystalline space that seemed to capture and amplify every photon of bioluminescent light. The chamber was a perfect dome, its walls lined with intricate crystal formations that pulsed with inner light. As soon as they entered, the crystals began to resonate, responding to their combined presence. The energy that had manifested during their battle with the shard claws returned tenfold. Elijah! Lilia gasped, her tiny form beginning to glow with crystal energy. Whatever happens next, know that The chamber exploded with light, and Elijah felt the crystal energy surge through him like never before. But this time, it wasn't just power, it was transformation. When the blinding crystal light faded, Elijah blinked to clear his vision. Where Lilia had been, a tiny figure barely reaching his knee, now stood a woman nearly his height. Her lavender skin glowed with residual crystal energy, her metallic attire having somehow adapted to her new size. Her galaxy-filled eyes, now level with his chest, widened in wonder. By the crystal heart, she breathed, her voice the same musical tone, but fuller, richer. It actually worked. Elijah stood transfixed. The transformation hadn't just made her bigger, it had perfectly scaled every detail of her ethereal beauty. Her long lavender hair still cascaded down her back, her delicate features maintained their exotic allure, and her metallic attire still caught the light in mesmerizing ways. "You're stunning," he managed, then immediately felt his ears burn. "I mean, you were stunning before, but—" Lilia laughed, the sound echoing through the crystal chamber with new depth. "Always so careful with your words, Commander." She took a step toward him, stumbled slightly, and Elijah instinctively caught her arms to steady her. The contact sent sparks of crystal energy between them. But more than that, it was their first touch as equals, skin to skin without the vast difference in scale. Lilia's hands gripped his forearms, her touch sending shivers through his tactical suit. "This will take some getting used to," she smiled up at him. Then her expression turned playful. "Though I must say, I prefer this vantage point for admiring your eyes." A distant screech reminded them of their situation. The shard claws were still out there, and they had no idea how long this transformation would last. "We should get back to the village," Elijah said reluctantly, though he didn't release his hold on her arms. "Your people need to know about this, and we need to understand what's happening." "Always the responsible one," Lilia teased, but her expression grew serious. "You're right, of course, but Elijah—" She stepped closer, eliminating the space between them. "Remember when I said I was tired of climbing you like a crystal formation?" Before he could respond, she rose on her tiptoes and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was electric, crystal energy dancing between them where their lips met. Elijah felt the power surge through him, amplifying every sensation. His hands moved to her waist, pulling her closer as she wound her arms around his neck. When they finally parted, both slightly breathless, the crystal chamber was pulsing in sync with their heartbeats. "I've wanted to do that properly since the moment you picked me up in that forest," Lilia confessed, her galaxy eyes sparkling. "Even when you thought I was going to eat you?" Elijah couldn't resist teasing. "And especially then," she shot back with a wicked grin. "Though I had different ideas about being devoured." Another screech, closer this time, shattered the moment. "Right," Elijah said, reluctantly stepping back. "Shard claws first, flirting later." They made their way back through the crystal tunnels, though this time Lilia had to duck and squeeze alongside him. She was surprisingly graceful despite her new size, adapting quickly to her transformed body. "The elders spoke of this," she explained as they navigated the passages. "In our most ancient texts, there are stories of sylphids who could alter their size through crystal resonance. But it was always temporary, lasting only as long as the emotional connection that powered it remained strong." "So this isn't permanent?" Elijah tried to keep the disappointment from his voice. "Not yet," Lilia said thoughtfully, "but the texts also speak of a way to stabilize the transformation. Something about harmonizing crystal frequencies at a quantum level during a moment of perfect emotional resonance." They emerged from the crystal caves to find the forest bathed in twilight. The bioluminescent flora cast everything in an ethereal glow, making Lilia's lavender skin shimmer. "Perfect emotional resonance, huh?" Elijah mused. "Any idea what that means exactly?" Lilia's answer was cut short by an earth-shaking roar. 3 shard claws burst from the underbrush, larger and more fearsome than the ones they had faced earlier. Their crystalline hides pulsed with angry red energy. "They've adapted to our previous attack," Lilia observed, falling naturally into a fighting stance beside Elijah. "Ready to test this new form in combat?" "Always," Elijah grinned, feeling crystal energy building between them. "And though I have to admit, I'm going to miss having you perched on my shoulder." "Focus on the fight, Commander," Lilia chided, though her eyes danced with amusement. "We can discuss alternate perching arrangements later." The battle that followed was like nothing Elijah had ever experienced. Fighting alongside Lilia at full size, their movements perfectly synchronized, was exhilarating. She moved with fluid grace, her crystal manipulation abilities even more powerful in her transformed state. Together, they drove back the shard claws with unprecedented efficiency. But as the fight wore on, Elijah noticed Lilia's form beginning to flicker, the crystal energy maintaining her size starting to fade. "The transformation's weakening," she called out, dodging a crystalline claw. "We need to end this quickly." Elijah felt their connection pulse through the crystal energy field. Without conscious thought, he reached for her hand. The moment their fingers intertwined, power surged between them. The remaining shard claws recoiled as waves of pure crystal energy erupted from their joined hands. When the light faded, the beasts had fled, their crystalline hides cracking from energy overload. But Lilia was once again her original size, barely reaching Elijah's knee. "Well," she said, looking up at him with a mixture of disappointment and determination. "At least we know it's possible." Elijah knelt down, offering his hand. She stepped onto his palm with practiced ease, though the gesture felt different now, charged with new meaning after their time as equals. "We'll figure it out," he promised. "The perfect emotional resonance, the quantum harmonics, all of it." "Of course we will," Lilia smiled, walking up his arm to her familiar perch on his shoulder. After all, who would have thought a tiny alien girl who feared being eaten would end up kissing the giant who found her? "Speaking of which," Elijah said as they headed toward the village, "we should probably tell your elders about this development." "Oh, they already know," Lilia said cryptically. "Why do you think they left those ancient texts where I could find them?" The Sylphid village was unlike anything Elijah had imagined. Nestled within a massive crystal formation, it was a masterpiece of organic architecture. Crystal spires housed tiny dwellings, connected by bridges of pure light. At their current size difference, Elijah had to remain outside while Lilia went to speak with the Council of Elders. "They're ready for us," Lilia announced, emerging from a crystal archway. She climbed deftly onto his offered palm. "Though I should warn you, they can be rather direct." The council chamber was the only structure sized for beings of Elijah's stature, suggesting this wasn't the first time the Sylphids had hosted larger visitors. 5 elderly Sylphids sat upon crystal thrones, their tiny forms emanating wisdom and power. "Commander Elijah Blackwood," the central elder spoke, his voice surprisingly resonant for his size. "We have watched your interactions with our Lilia with great interest." Elijah felt his face warm, wondering exactly how much they had observed. Lilia, still in his palm, squeezed his thumb reassuringly. "Your combat against the Shard Claws was impressive," another elder added, "but more intriguing was the transformation you achieved in the ancient chamber." "The Crystal Heart's resonance," a third elder mused, "not seen in 10 generations. Though perhaps not surprising, given the strength of your connection." The way she said connection made both Elijah and Lilia blush. "There is a way to make the transformation permanent," the first elder declared. "An ancient ritual called the Trial of Twin Flames. But be warned, it will test not only your combat skills but the very essence of your bond." "What exactly does this trial entail?" Elijah asked, unconsciously pulling Lilia closer to his chest protectively. 3 challenges, the second elder explained. "First, the trial of trust, where you must navigate the crystal maze while sharing a single consciousness. Second, the trial of harmony, fighting as one against our strongest crystal constructs. And finally, the trial of unity, where you must achieve perfect emotional resonance while maintaining crystal harmony under extreme duress. The risk is considerable, Warkudanai, the first elder warned. Failure could permanently sever your ability to connect through crystal energy. Are you willing to take that chance?" Elijah looked down at Lilia, who had risen to stand in his palm. Her galaxy eyes met his with unwavering determination. "I'd risk anything to be with you properly," she said softly, then added with a mischievous glint, "Besides, I'm not done exploring all the ways I can kiss you at full size." "When do we begin?" Elijah asked, unable to suppress his smile. "Now," the elders replied in unison. The chamber transformed around them, crystal walls shifting to create a vast labyrinth. Lilia's form began to glow with familiar energy. "The transformation during the trials will be stable," an elder's voice echoed, "but making it permanent requires completing all 3 challenges successfully." The crystal light enveloped Lilia, and moments later she stood beside Elijah at full height. Without hesitation, she took his hand, sending familiar tingles of energy through his body. "Ready to share minds, Commander?" she teased, though he could hear the nervous excitement in her voice. "As ready as I'll ever be to have you in my head," he replied, squeezing her hand. "Though I apologize in advance for any stray thoughts about how beautiful you are." "Oh, just beautiful?" She pressed against his side, her lips brushing his ear. "Your thoughts better be more interesting than that, considering what I've been thinking about you." Before Elijah could respond, crystal energy surged between them. Suddenly, he wasn't just holding Lilia's hand. He was feeling her emotions, seeing through her eyes. Her consciousness merged with his, creating a dizzying but exhilarating connection. They moved through the maze as one being, their steps perfectly synchronized. Elijah felt Lilia's natural affinity for crystal energy guiding them, while his tactical training helped analyze their surroundings. Their shared consciousness created an intimate dance of thoughts and feelings, each discovering new depths to the other's personality. "Your mind is so ordered," Lilia's thoughts echoed in his head. "Like a crystal matrix, but warmer. More passionate than you let show. And yours is like starlight," he thought back. "Bright and playful on the surface, but with depths I could spend lifetimes exploring." They reached the maze's center just as the walls began to shift again, transforming into an arena. Crystal constructs rose from the ground, humanoid figures made of pure crystal energy, each wielding weapons of light. "Trial of harmony," the elders' voices announced. "Fight as one." The constructs attacked with brutal efficiency, but Elijah and Lilia moved like they'd been fighting together for years. Their shared consciousness allowed them to coordinate perfectly, his physical combat skills blending seamlessly with her crystal manipulation. Lilia spun under his arm, sending waves of energy at approaching constructs while he defended her flank. They moved in perfect synchronization, each anticipating the other's needs without words. "You know," Lilia's thoughts reached him as they dispatched another construct. "Watching you fight is quite stimulating." The spike of attraction that accompanied her thought nearly made Elijah miss a block, but their shared reflexes compensated instantly. "Careful with those thoughts," he sent back, though he couldn't help sharing his own appreciation of how she moved in battle. "We're a little busy right now." Her mental laughter was like crystal chimes. "Just giving you motivation to finish this quickly." The final construct fell, and the arena dissolved into a vast crystal chamber. Energy crackled around them as their shared consciousness began to strain under mounting pressure. "The trial of unity," the elders intoned. "Achieve perfect emotional resonance while maintaining your connection under maximum crystal stress." The pressure increased exponentially. Maintaining their mental link became increasingly difficult as crystal energy threatened to tear them apart. "Elijah," Lilia's thoughts were strained but determined. "Remember when you first found me? When I thought you were going to eat me?" Not exactly the romantic memory I'd choose for this moment, he managed to think back, fighting to hold their connection. "But look how far we've come." Her mental voice grew stronger. "From fear to trust, from curiosity to love. Every moment leading to this." The word love resonated through their shared consciousness, amplifying their connection. Elijah pulled her closer physically as their minds entwined more deeply than ever. "I love you too," he thought, letting every emotion he'd held back flow freely between them. "Every impossible, wonderful part of you." The crystal energy surrounding them transformed from threatening to harmonious, responding to their perfectly aligned emotional states. Light erupted from their joined forms, filling the chamber with pure radiance. When the light faded, they stood facing each other, still at equal height. The elders reappeared, nodding in approval. "The trial of twin flames is complete," they announced. "The transformation is permanent." Lilia threw her arms around Elijah's neck, kissing him with all the passion they'd shared in their merged consciousness. The crystal chamber pulsed with their combined joy. "So," she murmured against his lips, "about those interesting thoughts you were trying to hide during the maze." "Later," he promised, holding her close. First we have some shard claws to deal with. Together." "Together," she agreed, her galaxy eyes sparkling with promise. "Though I expect a full exploration of those thoughts afterward." "As my lady commands," Elijah grinned, feeling truly complete for the first time in his life. News of Elijah and Lilia's successful completion of the trial of twin flames spread through the Sylphid village like crystal resonance. Young couples watched with barely concealed envy as Lilia, now permanently at human height, walked hand in hand with Elijah through the crystal gardens. "You're causing quite a stir," Elijah murmured, noticing the way other Sylphids whispered and pointed. "I'm starting to feel like a revolutionary." Lilia laughed, the sound still musical but fuller in her transformed state. "You are one, my love, the first human to truly understand our crystal magic, and the first outsider to complete the trial of twin flames." She pressed closer to his side, her lavender skin glowing with contentment. "Though I must say, watching all these admiring glances makes me want to remind everyone you're taken." "Oh? And how would you do that?" Elijah teased, already knowing the answer from their shared mental link. Instead of responding verbally, Lilia pulled him behind a crystal formation, her galaxy eyes sparkling with mischief. Their kiss sent ripples through the nearby crystals, causing several young sylphids to giggle and scurry away. "The elders want to speak with us," Lilia said when they finally parted, both slightly breathless. "Apparently, 3 more couples have requested permission to attempt the trial." 3? Elijah raised an eyebrow. "All with human partners?" 2 with humans, 1 with a Centaurian trader." Lilia's expression grew thoughtful. "It's causing quite the debate in the council. Some see it as a natural evolution of our species. Others worry about preserving our traditions." They made their way to the council chamber, where the 5 elders waited with uncharacteristically excited expressions. "Ah, our catalysts of change," the first elder greeted them. "We trust you're adjusting well to the transformation?" "Very well," Lilia replied, squeezing Elijah's hand. Through their lingering mental connection, he felt her joy at being able to interact with him as an equal. "Excellent," the second elder nodded, "because we have a proposition for you both." The chamber's crystals shifted, creating a holographic display of various alien species: humans, Centaurians, Andromedans, and others. For millennia, we sylphids have lived in isolation, our small size making us cautious of larger species. The third elder explained, "But your success has shown us another path. We propose establishing a cultural exchange program," the first elder continued, "with you two as its first ambassadors. Your story, from fear of being devoured to finding love, could help bridge the gap between species." Elijah and Lilia exchanged glances, their shared consciousness buzzing with excitement. "Of course," the fourth elder added with a knowing smile, "you'll need proper quarters. We've taken the liberty of growing a crystal dwelling suited for your combined needs." Lilia's cheeks darkened to deep purple, but her mental voice in Elijah's head was amused. "They're certainly not subtle, are they?" "The transformation has already attracted attention from the Galactic Council," the fifth elder said. "They're fascinated by the implications for interspecies relations." "And the Shard Claws? What about them?" Elijah asked, instantly alert. "Have you noticed their absence since your transformation?" The first elder smiled. "It seems they were drawn to unresolved crystal resonance, the very energy created by species who yearned to bridge their differences but couldn't. Now that you've shown it's possible, they've lost interest," Lilia finished, understanding dawning. "They were never our enemies. They were symptoms of our isolation." The revelation sparked excitement throughout the chamber. The implications were staggering, not just for sylphid-human relations, but for all species who might have compatible crystal resonance. "There is one more thing," the second elder said, producing a crystal pendant. "A wedding gift, you might say. It will allow you to adjust your size at will within certain limits. We thought it might make your ambassadorial duties easier and more interesting." Lilia accepted the pendant with wide eyes, her mental link with Elijah sparking with possibilities. "Now then," the first elder announced, "shall we discuss the details of your new position? After your bonding ceremony, of course." "Bonding ceremony?" Elijah blinked. "Oh yes," Lilia grinned up at him. "You didn't think you'd escape sylphid marriage traditions, did you? Hope you're ready to dance in crystal light wearing traditional ceremonial attire." Through their link, she showed him an image of the outfit in question, or rather the lack thereof. "Traditional, indeed, he muttered, earning knowing chuckles from the elders. Later that evening, in their new crystal dwelling that somehow managed to be both cozy and grand, Elijah held Lilia close as they watched the bioluminescent forest through windows of pure crystal. "Remember when you thought I was going to eat you?" he asked, nuzzling her neck. She hummed, leaning back against him. "Though I must say, being devoured by you has turned out to be quite enjoyable in other ways." "Lilia!" he laughed, still amazed at how direct sylphid culture was about such matters. "What?" She turned in his arms, her galaxy eyes twinkling. "I'm simply expressing appreciation for how things turned out. After all, who would have thought that little misunderstanding would lead to transforming not just us, but potentially the entire galaxy?" "Speaking of transformation," Elijah nodded toward the crystal pendant, "care to test out its capabilities?" Lilia's smile turned wicked. "Why, Commander Blackwood, are you suggesting we experiment with size-changing abilities for personal entertainment?" "Among other things," he grinned, pulling her closer. We are supposed to be researching cross-cultural relations after all. For science, then, she agreed solemnly, though her eyes sparkled with mischief. The pendant began to glow as she activated it. Though I should warn you, Sylphid research is very thorough. I'm counting on it, Elijah murmured, capturing her lips in a kiss that sent crystal energy dancing through their dwelling. As the forest's bioluminescence dimmed into night, their love continued to transform not just themselves, but the very fabric of galactic society. The story of the tiny alien girl who feared being devoured, only to find love with her supposed predator, would become legend, a testament to how fear could transform into love and how love could transform entire worlds.